I wanted to begin this meeting by first of all thanking you so much for taking the time to join me today. And my first question that I ask everyone here on Aaron's Opinion to get us started is, so anyway, who is Renee Rickmeester?
Well, um, it's just me. Basically, I'm the creator and executive producer of the Cooking Without Looking TV show. I started 21 years ago doing this, and everybody on the show is blind or visually impaired.
So, Renee, what were you doing before you created Cooking Without Looking? I've looked over some of the things you've done. You've done a lot. So, obviously you didn't just wake up one day and say, okay, I want to start cooking without looking. I really, I've always wanted to go into the kitchen and just stop looking and start cooking. Okay, you didn't do that. Some key things happened to you during your life. Obviously, by the way, I believe you're sighted, right?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I
Okay.
consider myself sort of like the translator between the sighted and the non-sighted.
That's interesting. So, well, what made you interested in blind people, and then what made you interested in cooking, and then what made you want to stop? What made you want to stop looking?
Well, um, I worked in TV from the time I was like 17 years old. And so right before I decided to do this, I was working at the CBS station in Miami. I was the press and public relations manager, but I did a lot of things along with it. I also produced PSAs, and I also, for about a year or so, worked on a news desk as the assignment editor and as a associate news producer.
And
And I'm sorry, go on. Sorry.
oh, no worries, no worries. So, tell us more in a little bit of detail. What were some of your most interesting things that you observed, or your most interesting accomplishments along the way? Obviously, at some point, you came in contact with blind people. So, tell me
No.
about your first contact with blind people.
Oh, well, that's interesting. I'll go back a little. I didn't know anyone who was blind. And when you work in TV, I was on a lot of different boards, for good causes and everything, but I wanted something to leave my family with some sort of a legacy. The first time I met a blind person where I actually just sat and talked, um, it was it was probably the gentleman who I spoke with to learn more about being blind and cooking. He was a chef, and he was also a professor at FIU in Miami, Florida International University School of Hospitality. And I ran the name past him because in like lots of conversations, I was like talking to a lot of blind people. Most of it was not face to face; it was on emails and listservs. And so what I did was I said, well, does that sound too comical, cooking without looking? And he said, no, I love it. Later on, I found out that it was a lady in Texas she did her thesis and she called it Cooking Without Looking. And so, but anyway, the first time I met a person's blind, I don't really look at a person and say, hey, you're blind or whatever. He had some vision left. Um, I just look at people as people. I it wasn't like I marked. Now I did have to understand when the people came to work with me. One of our people was totally blind, Celia, and I did have to learn, like to offer my elbow or to offer my shoulder, and I tell you something. I forget so much that a person is blind. And sometimes when you're my friend and you're walking around with me and you're blind, I might make a mistake and just forget and maybe walk you into something by mistake. which happened to Celia because we were great friends too. Um, but at this point, I don't. I don't really think of a person like just separate them and call them a blind person. It's like a person. In fact, I think I know more blind people than I know sighted people right now.
That's really interesting. So, what is something that you always struggle to understand about us blind people that I can clarify for you?
I don't know if I've struggled to understand anything because like everyone's been really, really open um with me. There was something that I've noticed, and I sort of have my own theory of it, but I think, you know, I think you can almost tell a difference between a person who was born blind and and who was sighted and then went blind. There's a feeling I get that's a little bit different um, from the people, and I can sort of understand that because I think if you're born blind, you don't really know what you're missing as much, and maybe when you've had sight, I think that sometimes depression sets in. But you tell me.
I think that's one of the things that I focus on my show is that I cannot understand what it must be like to be a sighted person who then loses their vision. I mean, that must be weird. I can't even begin to comprehend what that must be like for people. So I was born blind with glaucoma, by the way,
Ah,
and a congenital heart defect. But anyway, I was born blind, so I've never had to make a transition from being a sighted person able to drive a car. I never did. We don't miss what we don't have. So
right.
that type of thing. But more on that later. So tell me about the history of the Cooking Without Looking TV show. I've seen that your show has gone through many different varieties, flavors, phases,
Yeah.
edition versions. Can you kind of paint the picture of where the show began, how it works, and what it does today, and all of that to clarify it for me?
Well, when you create something that's never been done before, you're sort of like to put it mildly, it's sort of like you're feeling yourself around. You're sort of like walking around blind. You don't know what to do, and so you look one way and another. It started after I left CBS, and then I started my own advertising and PR company. Like I said, I wanted to start a legacy, something for my family that would, live on after I did, and something that did good for a group of people that I thought were often misunderstood. And I thought blindness was probably it. And so then we worked to get some funding, and we got onto PBS in South Florida. And we were there for several seasons. And then the recession hit, the Great Recession of 2009. And so we spent most of the time, I didn't want to let it go. Um, there wasn't a lot of sponsorship money available. And so what I did was we went to lots of, um, we spoke at different conventions. We also did a lot of like the Boca Raton Wine and Food Festivals. We did a lot of food festivals, and we were at Macy's in Aventura in Miami. We did a lot of things to keep it up. Now, when it got towards the pandemic, a friend of mine, you may know her, Sylvia Stinson Perez, she was on one of the original shows, said to me, well, why don't you do it on Zoom? Why don't you try it on Zoom? And I did. And actually, this pandemic's been wonderful because when I did it on Zoom, we always wanted to reach out around the world, and we've reached more than 25 countries now between the podcast and the show. We just did one on Friday in Jamaica. We wouldn't have the funding for that, but we like to shine the light on everybody around the world, blind people all over the world. And the thing I get most often that people tell me is they'll say how much fun they had, which is important to me, probably up there. We like to help people with their self-esteem and confidence. Most people say, well, I never thought I'd be on a show and cooking because, I'm blind. And then the other thing is they say they thank me for the opportunity. And it's like you just have to ask and you're on the show. It's no big deal. We don't do like all sorts of ways of finding out uh how should I say it? We don't put you through any kind of a screening process. Um and we just want you to have fun.
You don't screen the blind people at all, really?
No. And well, I talk.
I'm just giving you a hard time because there can be some characters even in the blindness community. Blind people
Oh,
can be crazy
oh yeah.
too.
Well, when you talk about characters, that to me, that's like the pot calling the kettle black for me. I don't call anyone a character. I'm like a head character. But no, you know what? I talk to everybody at first, but it's not with an eye towards, well, are you going to be on the show or not? Do you look good enough or not? Nothing that traditional TV does. Nothing that traditional TV does. And so I talk and somebody once said, well, how do you know they're blind? I go, we can pretty much tell if someone is blind or visually impaired because we all have our basic movements, and in 21 years, I've never seen anybody try and fake it. Never. It just, you
I'll have
know,
to look. I'll have to look in I think in my contacts on Facebook. I think I have someone who can. I think I have a faker on my phone over there. I'll put them in. I'll put them in touch. I'll see if I can get you a fake.
blind person.
I think I think not guys. This is why we say knock on wood. You should knock on some wood, Renee. You shouldn't say that because I guarantee you you're gonna get a faker now. Oh God.
As I said that, right?
Just as
No,
you said it, someone just came up here. Okay. Well,
no.
okay. So that's really cool. That's really cool. So when the show was on PBS, how would the show go? Would it be a lot of interviews, a lot of cooking, a lot of what was the kind of the storyline of each episode, would you say?
I don't know if you looked at any of our shows now, but it's basically the same. We had the same two hosts, believe it or not, Alan Preston and Annette Watkins. They've been so tremendous. We always had a live studio audience, and we'd have two cooks, two just regular basic people cooking, and they would be with one of our hosts. And the third segment is food for thought. And we talk to people in the blindness community, whether it's a doctor or it's sort of like the part that gives hope. Oftentimes it's a blindness organization. And it was very, very well received. In fact, I'll tell you a funny little story. When we were going to be on the station, the program director was someone who I knew. We were on the National Academy of TV Arts and Sciences board together. And anyway, he didn't tell his boss, the general manager, that we were going to have a show with blind people on, right? And he said, well, I think he might feel sad because he doesn't want to see people feel sad on TV. I'm like, no, this is going to be really positive. You know me. I like to do fun things and keep things happy and just enjoy. So what he did was he didn't tell his boss that he was going to have a TV show with blind people. What he did was he snuck it on the weekend, noon on Saturday. His boss loved it. And from then on, he was like one of our biggest champions. He would walk into the studio and meet all the people who were there, the blind people, the sighted people in the audience, everybody. And he loved it. So it became so popular that Celia, the totally blind lady from our host, she's now passed, bless her soul. Um, she was in a Target one day, and she could feel that someone was like following her in the aisle, and she was like looking at pans and stuff. And she finally turned around and said to the woman, "Excuse me, would you, do you have something, something like, she just turned around and looked at her, even though she was blind. She looked towards her and she said, "Can I help you?" And the lady said, "Aren't you from that cooking show?" She goes, "I was just following you to see what you were buying so I could buy the same thing." Yeah, it's like poor Celia was being stalked in the Target.
That's cute. I mean, what if Celia was just buying like napkins or like paper towels? I mean, anyone can buy napkins or paper towels without being on a cooking show.
I know. Well, I think she was in the area with the gadgets, like all the cooking gadgets. I think that's where she was. And then the
That kind of
lady
gave her
followed
away.
him. Yeah, yeah, it was just funny. We've had lots of good stories, and always keeping a sense of humor.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I'm sure. What was the most unexpected thing that ever happened during the show or on the set of the show while you were uh, filming or recording? We should say all these episodes. Like, what was the most unusual, unexpected thing that ever happened?
Actually, the most unexpected thing was actually getting it on TV. But
Well, that's true. Well, that's true. That's a fair point. But I mean, after it was
I
already on TV, what was the most unexpected thing that happened, like in the physical recording of the episodes
oh,
overall? Yeah.
okay. No, I'm just teasing around with you.
Oh, sure,
Um,
sure.
um, there was this fellow, and his name was Joe, and he was like 80 something years old, but there's no filter on him, okay? And what he was doing was making meatballs and pasta,
Oh
and he
God.
tested, he was totally blind, but he was testing the water to see if it was boiling by putting his hand in it. And everyone was screaming at me like, "Renee, look what he's doing." I'm like, he's 81 years old. He knows what he's doing. And he's sticking his hand in a boiling pot of water to see if it's boiling. Now, we don't recommend that. Normally, you just listen for the bubbles, right?
I would.
You
I would listen, guys. I would listen for the bubbles. Right.
But he has no filter, and he was a crusty old guy, and so what I did was when we edited, I sort of took that part out because if there was like a little kid or somebody in the audience watching, they may get the idea to do that. So I took that part out where he was sticking his hand in the water.
That's funny. That's funny. As someone who watches and consumes an enormous amount of television, YouTube, podcast, I mean, I consume just as much content as I produce for the community. I've always wondered, I've always sat on my couch or my stool at home and wondered, hey, how do networks even decide what shows get put on the air and what creates, with any show, what creates ratings and what creates, like, what makes a show quote unquote popular? Like, can you explain it from a professional background? Yeah.
Well, there's no rhyme or reason, Aaron. There is really no rhyme or reason. There are shows like Cheers or Friends, those old shows that they took a long time to catch on, but once they caught on, they were on fire, and they lasted 9 years. I think the average of a really good show is 9 years, and then after that, it sort of gets old.
Right.
I don't know. It's what catches.
I mean, I guess I'm just wondering, is there some sort of like, are there people behind the scenes that have a rubric, I guess, for grading shows? I mean,
No,
I'm
no,
just curious about that.
no. It's like you might as well just throw spaghetti against the wall and see if it sticks. So
Right.
every single TV person that I've ever known, each one has their own little ideas. Okay, and some people will like a certain type of show, and some people will like, well, how the people look in the show. They want them to look glamorous or beautiful or whatever. There's just and it's cyclical too, because for a while there, um, medical shows and cop shows were extremely popular. Then they sort of fell by the wayside. Reality shows are sort of popular now, except I feel like they're waning right now. And they're not really reality, but they're cheap to make. So there are a lot of them. There's no rhyme or reason to science. There's nothing scientific about it. It's like a gut feeling. Really, honestly, if I'm to be totally honest with you, Aaron, it's a gut feeling.
That's interesting. That's interesting because a lot of people wonder about that type of thing. But really good. So I'm sure that you've worked with a lot of prestigious chefs on your show. Who was the most important person who ever was on your set?
Oh, they're all important, Aaron.
That's
Aaron.
true, but I mean the most. I mean not, and you're right. Important's not the word. I guess most.
I didn't have famous people on, if that's what you're trying to say. There was one person who we kind of had on, and he wasn't blind, and we were going to do him with uh eye coverings on, but
Sleep shades. Yeah.
yeah. But he didn't do it. But however, he was one of the finalists in one of the shows, and I can't think of his name. But honestly, it's so much fun dealing with just regular people, and that's what I wanted to do. Um, it's a lot of fun with regular people because you never know what to expect, and
Right.
everybody's always so grateful. I'm telling you, nearly 100% of the people were so grateful just to be on and to be featured, because they felt that they would never be able to do something like that because they were blind and nobody wanted to see them. And I it's actually the opposite. It's truly the opposite. This show proves that it's exactly the opposite, that people just are fascinated, and it's educational because we show people in a fun way that, like, people who are blind or visually impaired, and we've also had people who are deaf blind on, that they're like everybody else. You just do it in a different manner. You cook in a different manner. You have other tips, and you know what? The sighted people can pick up on the same tips. I use some of the same tips when I cook. When I was editing, usually it's like a day or two of editing to edit the show down. When we were shooting in South Florida, I would be so hungry after I was done editing. I would. And I would make the same thing that we did in the studio. Um, we've had quite a few blind chefs that they were chefs and they were also blind, and they started their own catering businesses, which I think is a tremendous idea. um, we've had a couple of those people. We had kids. One of our favorite shows are to have the blind kids on. We've had a lot of those. The energy level is just amazing. We've had people from the ages of 9 through 83 on the show, and blind. The 9-year-old, she came to us from China. She was adopted by her parents in South Florida, and she's in college now. So it's sort of cool to watch everybody grow up.
That's so good. That's so good. You mentioned that there's some contests or competitions that can go on during your show, I think. So, what are some? So, are there some finalists or some competitions that your show does to make the show
No,
more? Oh no. Oh,
no, you know what? We have one idea coming up when we're off Zoom, and we land when we land a when we land a deal with Netflix, okay? There's an idea that makes it a little bit different. We're going to have sighted people. After the blind person cooks, the sighted person will cook, and only with blindfolds on. But we don't do that right now. Everybody else does a competition. I don't want this show to be a competition and to make people nervous, and and frightened and sad and let down because they lost. It's all about, what, this is building your confidence, your self-esteem, enjoy that time when you're on stage.
Definitely. That's really important. That's really, really important for people without doubt. So you said that you've reached a large audience overseas, but how many different countries have been represented on your stage as participants?
Okay, let's see. So we reached 25 countries. Let me see. We had South Florida. I'm sorry, South Africa, Jamaica, Barbados, um, Guyana, South America, um, Trinidad and Tobago, and let's see, we've got St. Lucia coming up in March. That's about it. That's it. So how many was that? Like six, 5 or 6 so far?
That's really good. That's really, really excellent. And then does the audience get to eat the food afterwards? What do you do? What do you do with all this food, all this extra food?
Well, they're usually in their own kitchens, so I guess they can just have it for dinner. Um, sometimes, uh, sometimes there were a couple of events in West Palm Beach where after there are a couple people from West Palm Beach on our show, and they just brought it to the Braille Club, which is a club by and for blind people, and I used to belong to that. But they brought it to the event afterwards, some of the food. But yeah, I know, it's just like gather the neighbors around. There's a bunch of food here.
That's so good. That's so good. And what, as far as the editing process goes, a lot of people want to know. So, how are shows when it was on TV? How are shows edited? What can you tell me about that process?
Well, Naya. Um, the process was we would shoot the show live and then edit it down. It usually took a day or two to edit it down. I would go and I'd look at the shots that I'd want. I shot sheeted the whole thing. So I kept in some mistakes because people learn from them. And there was a case where a little lady came up to me after one of the shows and she said, I'm 76 and I've been cooking all my life, but I just started to go blind 7 months ago. She goes, and I was afraid to go back into the kitchen. And because I didn't want to make a mistake, but she saw one of our professionals make a mistake and she said, I'm going back in the kitchen. If he can make a mistake, I can make a mistake. So anyway, so I do keep some of them in. Also, we've had some, like funny outtakes, and I kept them in just, as a gag, just as for fun. So after the shot sheeting, I would go into editing, and the person who I would edit with was the hands-on person. I would just tell them, the time codes on the tape, and he or she, because I had 2 different people, they were excellent, and they would edit the show and along with me. So it was a teamwork effort. And then the show would go on Wednesday nights at 8 and on noon on Saturdays.
Yeah, that's really good. So as far as the most popular time or where you got the most viewership, was it always on the Wednesday nights or Saturday afternoons? Or was there no rhyme or reason?
The Saturday noons seem to be real popular. Just because I guess people are just like waking up and getting going, and then they started to watch the show. I don't know if there was any rhyme or reason. Honestly, Aaron, I think part of the popularity of the show is a lot of people don't know blind people, and they're amazed at everything that people are doing, and they're blind, and people still ask like, oh, blind people cook? It's like, Yeah, because you know what? Blind people eat. Just like we all eat. So I think that oftentimes people watch just out of their a foodies, B, it's a different kind of a show, or C, they just are enthralled by seeing a blind person and all of the skills.
Right, right, sure, sure. That's all really good. So, what are some of your other, I guess, futuristic projects that you hope to work on with blind people? I mean, now that you've mastered this whole concept of, cooking without looking, what are some other, I don't know, what are some other shows that you would like to do that still highlight blind people in such a positive way? What are some other genres, I guess, that you would do with blind people?
Well, the other idea I had was something called Traveling Without Trouble. And it's a lot about people with all disabilities, varying abilities, and traveling, you know. And so, yes, it would be blind people and hearing impaired and the people in wheelchairs and canes and just just showing people when you have a disability how much fun you can still have and travel and giving travel tips. But I think I'm going to wait a little longer with that with the pandemic. The cooking show, there's also sports shows, like beep ball and things like that we could do, sporting shows featuring people who are blind. um it's a funny you should ask that because I have such a focus on the cooking without looking. Also, we would like to just find a forever place, a forever streaming service or something to put it on. But weirdly enough, um, being just on Zoom has been really amazing. So, but that's really what we have in store for us in the future for Cooking Without Looking. And then maybe the traveling show and maybe a sports show featuring people who are
Mm-hmm.
blind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like the idea of the traveling show. I've done a lot of traveling all over the world, all over Europe and overseas. So I really support you in that idea. I think that's a tremendous idea. Maybe include some hiking, some outdoor activities, some adventurous type of thing. That would be really. I mean, I am genuinely interested in that. That would be a really good idea. Yeah.
Yes, yes. We did one of the shows in the Murakami Museum in up in Palm Beach County in Florida. It's a beautiful, beautiful Japanese park with waterfalls and everything. But what's really interesting about it was in each area that had a sign to read, they also had something for a blind person to pick up a phone and listen to a description of what they were looking at. And we like to highlight things like that as well. It was just a beautiful, beautiful show. That's probably one of my favorite shows, that one.
Sure. And where have you traveled, by the way, overseas?
Okay, here goes. I don't even stop to think of it. Um, Paris, in Paris, and in the Bahamas, and Jamaica, and Sao Paulo, Brazil. Where else? Some of them were on cruises. I had like three cruises, and so those get sort of smushed together. Um, what was the other one? That's it for now that I can remember off the top of my head.
Because I would wonder, with the importance of your work and what you do, which is what you're doing is a tremendously overall what you're doing is the right thing to do. So I support you in doing the right thing philosophically. So thank you for that. But it's also important work that needs to be done in the community. So also thank you for that. I would wonder, have you ever heard of anyone else in any other country doing a cooking without looking or a show similar but only for their country, something like that.
No,
Yeah.
no, not at all. I haven't. And we always say that we're the first. And I think we're pretty much the only show which features people um, on a TV show. Now, there is C on Apple TV, but that's not like real life blind people. That's not everyday blind people working. And we are the everyday This Is Life for Blind People show. And I'm pretty sure we're the only one. I mean, that's from what I know, and I've been doing this a while. I've not seen another show that was trying to copy us.
Mm, yeah, that surprises me that there's not. I'm glad. On one hand, I'm pleased that you're the one and only, but I'm surprised that there's not like a show somewhere in Australia or England or Germany or Netherlands that does a similar.
You
It
know
just
what?
surprises me.
Germany and Netherlands actually watch us. I saw on our analytics that there were people from Germany and the Netherlands watching us. You know what? If I told you even more about my life, I'll tell you why they wouldn't do it.
Well, wait a
Because
minute. Well, wait a minute. Hold on. That okay? You see, you also bring great food and you bring great material. Wow, you stumbled into that trap. So tell us this secret about your life. Why wouldn't they do it? Oh, we're listening. Go right ahead.
well, you have to be immune to no's. Know this, know that. No, that could never happen. No, that can never be done. Why would you want to do that? Who would watch it? Because I do come from a TV background, but it's like the old TV background where people, it has always been thus. And if it's not a copy of another type of show that was successful, ironically, I sat on the board of the National Academy of TV Arts and Sciences in Miami, and there was a man there. We were co-workers, and he had glaucoma. And I asked him one day at a meeting. I go, "Hey, here's my idea. What do you think?" No, that'll never work. Who would watch that? And like, man, you've got glaucoma, you know. But it's a lot of fighting, not fighting, but a lot of arguing with people and telling them, a lot of advocacy for people who are blind and saying, no, I know this will work. I know that people are looking for this. It makes people happy on one side, and it makes people happy on the other. If you're sighted, you enjoy cooking, you're going to watch it. If you just like to see what it's like to know blind people, you can enjoy it. If you're blind, you're visually impaired, you can enjoy it, and get some ideas on cooking. So it's I don't like to use the word, but I'll use the word. It's a lot of struggle along the way, making people believe in you. And
Sure.
and I think that's why a lot of people probably wouldn't even begin to try it, because it's not like, oh, you know what, I'll leave my job and open a dress shop. People have done that. You can make money off this. This isn't a money making operation. I will tell you a joke here. My grandson, the other day, I showed him our YouTube channel, and he looked and he goes, "Oh, only 105 subscribers? He said, Grandma, we need to be millionaires. We need more than that. We need to be millionaires." I go, "But that's not the purpose, Elisha. That's not the purpose. It's not about making money." And that's another reason why people didn't do this. This isn't about
absolutely. You know what? Absolutely not. And the miracle behind that is, I know that to be true here on Aaron's Opinion as well. I don't look at my analytics or subscribers, but I do notice that numbers keep slowly inching up over time, over trying and trying and trying again, and over believing again. Because I think the secret thing you said before about the ratings, people just kind of have a feeling. People can secretly tell that what you're doing is the right thing, and you don't need to tell them that. People secretly are more supportive than you actually are ever aware. I can't even begin to understand how many other blind people are benefited just by me having this conversation with you. And who knows? You never fully know. Sure, we have numbers, we have countries' flags that pop up in the analytics, but I think the impact is a lot greater and a lot more. So that's exactly the reason why you should continue to do what you're doing. And I'm not going to tell you how many subscribers I have, but I have more than 105. So
Well, it's a funny thing. It's 115 today. That 105 was yesterday.
oh, good. Oh, well, good. Well, why didn't you just say 115? You shouldn't demote
Well,
yourself to 105. Jeez.
when I was showing him yesterday, because he's used to all those YouTube channels, the little kids who make $30 million by playing with toys or something.
That's ridiculous.
With
Which, by the way, I'm only giving out my opinion. I think that, in my opinion, that's wholly inappropriate and wholly ridiculous. If not inappropriate, it's ridiculous. But yes,
I'm right there with you, Aaron. I'm right there with you.
yeah. That's just silly stuff. It is weird how certain channels and certain things get pushed to the top of the of the system. That's the mystery behind it. Nobody knows exactly how.
Those are the money making things because kids watch other kids playing with toys, and Mattel sponsors them. And because one of the shows that my grandkids watch, they were saying that it was sponsored by Mattel, and they've got all these Mattel toys, and yeah, they're in it for the money, and that's cool, if that's what you want to do, have your kids learn that money is the most important thing in life. Who am I to
Right.
say?
Well, I actually think we need to. I think I need to voice my opinion. I think that the younger gen. I mean, I'm 30 years old, and I think that people younger than me need to realize pretty quickly that money is not what it's about. It's about knowing that you truly are doing the right thing philosophically, and that your mental compass is pointing in the right direction. And if people only understood that, then they would definitely make money and know that they made it by doing the right thing. But, you know,
Right. Exactly. 100%. That's exactly
right.
right.
But it's
You
really
know,
weird. It's just a very very strange thing. I've known of you for a few years. I've known of your show off and on, but I mean I've never gotten around to interviewing you. I just have to be curious. Not that it makes any bit of difference either way. Have you ever heard of an Aaron Richmond or Aaron's opinion before I contacted you?
I'm sorry, Aaron. No.
That's fine.
Yeah. I knew of you. Once you contacted me, I knew of you, and I'll never forget you. That's the one thing with me. I might not know of you. Like Aaron, most of these big stars I've never heard of. And I worked at CBS. I
Mm-hmm.
got to meet all sorts of stars and everything. But once I know you, I'll remember you. I never forget.
That's important. That's important. So how many people then do you think you can remember? That's the next hurdle.
You know what? If I were to see, I do remember everybody. If you were to say your name like 20 years from now, I'd remember your name. Maybe I wouldn't remember what you looked like, or maybe I would. That's the $20 million question. But
Right. You
I
might
would,
you might remember my red shirt. You might remember that. You might remember the name.
yeah, I
Yes.
would, I would remember your name. The faces, most often I do, but sometimes I don't. And there are sometimes people will say, "Oh, I remember you," and it's like, "Oh, thank you," but I might not have remembered them because they were in like a meeting or something, and where I wasn't like one on one with them. If I'm one on one talking with someone, I'll remember.
And
Oh,
that's go ahead.
you wondered about a famous person who knew us. I don't know if you're familiar with attorney Benjamin Crump. He's a civil rights attorney. He's a famous civil rights attorney, and he
Excellent.
loves our show. And he sponsored us. He sent the sponsorship to us. But he really loves the show. He said, I've never heard of anything like it before. So he was one person who really he was famous. He is
Right.
famous.
Right. 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 Now, when the show was on quote unquote TV, not that we really, everything you could say everything's TV, but when it was on, I guess,
PBS. Yeah.
yeah, that. What like was it ever like at the on the national like was it ever syndicated nationally, or was it only like how does that work? Like what level of syndication was it, I guess?
PBS is sort of unusual in that you have to pay them to be on at production. They decide that they want you, right? And then you have to find your sponsors to cover your production costs. So um it didn't go to the national level, except I noticed that online they have it listed nationally. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's a weird thing. It's very difficult. That's why, move on from PBS, because you know they'll tell you you can be on, but then you have to pay for your you have to get sponsors to pay for your production costs there.
Right, right. And you say it's unusual that you had to pay the network to have your show on their network. What, in other words, you said it's unusual in that way. What's the other way of doing it?
Well, they pay you for your show.
Right.
Like a Netflix. I believe that the beginning, if you're a beginning show there and they decide that you want to be on, their beginning is like $350,000. That's the lowball thing. Um, they pay you to be on their network. They
Hmm.
pay
Hmm.
for content. But PBS, is basically a whole public service network. So they're looking for money for themselves. But I tell you what, this was like the most wonderful station. It was WXCL in Palm Beach. And it was like a family. I mean, I was lucky to have like two families in TV, family at CBS in Miami. The people I worked with there we still talk. We still talk after all these years. Um, and if somebody gets sick or, is hurting or whatever, we contact them still. And the PBS station, WXCL, they were just, everybody there was like so supportive and tremendous and fun. It was just it was magical.
Well, that's really interesting. And then what would be the process to get a show onto Netflix? Like how would that work?
Oh, I've been trying that. Usually you have to have someone speak for you. You have to have like an agent, like have someone speak for you. But I've been trying to do it myself. I've been reaching out to CEO, Mr. Ted Sarandis. I've heard he's a nice man, and he makes decisions on shows. I've also contacted the Rachel Ray show. I've actually talked Rachel Ray show, and a couple of other things, a couple of other places. I'm sorry. Um, my grandchildren just came in. Um, where else? Oh, and she's on in the mornings. Um, Drew Barrymore. But
Hmm.
Rachel Ray I reached out to because her mom actually has macular degeneration.
Hmm. Hmm. That's all extremely interesting.
So I just reach out to them on my own and
Hmm.
see who I can. Hey, I've been trying to get Stevie Wonder for 2 years now. So um I've been so I'd really like him. I've been in contact with his publicist and a couple of other people there, his business manager, um, sent scripts and things, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I see. I see. Yeah, that's all really interesting. So I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of questions about me. What are some deep and burning questions that you really want to know about me?
Well, how did you get involved in doing the podcast?
I'm so glad you asked. So my background is that actually academically I studied international affairs, so that's my academic side.
Me too.
Really?
In my mind is international relations.
Right, exactly. Mine, I think mine says relations too, but I'm not. It either says international relations or international affairs, one or the other. But at any rate, um, I graduated from the university, whatever university about 8 years ago, and I noticed that I was really good at teaching, and I really enjoyed teaching people. So I actually became an English teacher online, and that's what I've been doing for the past 6.5 years.
Oh,
And when I,
wonderful.
thank you, yeah. And when I wasn't doing that, I was spending a lot of time listening to other blindness related podcasts around the community. But Renee, I had a problem, which was that a lot of these podcasts were not open to guests. And I wanted to create a universe, a world, a product where anyone, basically mostly blind, but certainly sighted people like you are welcome, but mostly blind people can come and share their story. Similarly to Cooking Without Looking, where I feel that there is a gap in the market, and I do feel that blind people are oftentimes underrepresented and often and if not underrepresented, then they are not, there's a lot of issues around the community dealing with self-esteem and just the motivation of blind people. I mean, I'm in a lot of these groups on Facebook. The morale of the blindness community, you don't need me to tell you, the morale of the community is very, very low right now.
Yeah.
So I wanted to create an environment where people can come and share their stories, because I've told a lot of serious stories on my channel. Your story is very uplifting, positive, interesting, entertaining, really, really
Oh,
fun.
thank you.
But I've actually had a lot of really disturbing conversations where we've talked about, sometimes I feel as a podcaster, talk show host person, that sometimes some people just need to talk to me. Some people just, there's some other guests where they just need to get it off their chest. They just need someone to talk to. Now, you are not in that category. You came because you wanted to. You don't, nothing personal. You don't have a need. You don't have a need for my podcast, but you're kind and strong, and you're a great person in the community. So thank you for, taking this opportunity and coming. But I
Well,
focus a lot of my content on blind people who I think need to, push it off their chest and tell stories that are going to help other blind people. So
yeah.
that's the difference between you and other guests. And that's exactly the reason why I appreciate you so much. Actually, spending the time to explain this from your perspective, it's really fascinating to me. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, Aaron. I really appreciate you inviting me on. You know, it you inviting me on does make me feel very good. It helps my self-esteem. It makes me feel happy because um I'm just uh okay. Um I'm just trying to figure just turn that down, please. I you work and you work and you work and you do something and you think you're doing something that is helping people, but you don't really know. It's sort of like you're in this vacuum. And we spoke to the National Federation of the Blind Florida convention a couple months ago in October, at the end of September, being October, and we had to all introduce ourselves. And when I got in front of the group, I said, "Hi, I'm Renee Rentmeester, executive producer of the Cooking Without Looking TV show." And they just burst out like applauding. Like, I was overcome. I just started to cry. Like, I didn't realize anyone felt that way. I just do my work. So you are a big help to me as well, Aaron.
I appreciate it. I really appreciate that. I think going to those conventions is very important. That's an environment where a lot of blind people go to those conventions to network and to get more information. So that is, tremendously important. That you would go to that, and that's also really, really, really good. So by the way, so you said that you've turned Cooking Without Looking into a podcast. What can you tell us about
Yes,
that?
yes, we do podcast. It's well, basically, I'm interviewing blind and visually impaired people on there, getting information on their life, just like what you're doing with me. And it's really very nice getting their view. And then at the end, they provide a recipe, but like talk about the things that have happened to them, good and bad, whatever, humorous sometimes. Um, just talking about their lives as people who are blind and visually impaired, pretty much like what you do, Aaron. And we've got like 90, about 90 episodes right now, but that's what we do, and just shine a light on the various different kinds of blindness as well.
Yeah, I think that is the spectrum of blindness is something that I think is very difficult for people to to understand. So that is really really important. Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Right. The podcast I did the other day was with a gentleman who he's going blind. He's partially blind, and but he's walking with a cane. And a gentleman on the bus gave him his seat, then saw him looking at his phone and said he overheard the guy say, "Oh, he's not blind." So it's educational. There is a spectrum of blindness, and as hearing as well. There's a spectrum there as well. It's not all like black and white. It's a sliding continuum.
It is indeed. Well, as we start to run out of time, I always like to ask a great question to end another great episode as always, which is this. If you, Renee, can ask me only one more question to really make me sweat, to see if I'm really worth my salt as a podcaster, to really get under my skin, what do you really want to ask me?
A 60 minutes type question, I presume. Um, I don't like doing that to people.
Oh, but I
Um,
like it being done to me. That's why I brought it on to
um,
my.
uh, what what is the hardest thing you've ever done as a blind person?
I think probably one of the hardest things ever was overcoming the lack of expectations that society has for blind people, becoming educated, completing university, and then maintaining my career and my hobbies, all alongside the interesting and crazy society that we have today. I think
Definitely,
I
definitely.
think that would be it. I hope that in the future, I want you to know this on air and off air. If there's ever something I can do to help Cooking Without Looking, to help your show, I would really love to participate.
Well,
Because
of course, you're there. Well, you can be on our podcast and you can be on one of our shows coming up. That's no problem. You like to cook.
well, I would say that's the problem. I would say no. But I see. I don't cook. That's why maybe I think I can fit in better on the podcasting side. I would be honored if you would interview me. That would be really really interesting.
We'll
Yes.
we'll set up a date and time that works well with you, Aaron, and you're there.
Oh well, thank you so much. You guys can click the link in the description to learn more about Cooking Without Looking. But if someone wants to get in touch with you, Renee, how can they do that?
They can call me directly, 305-200-9104, or go to our Cooking Without Looking TV show website, which is www.cookingwithoutlookingtv.wordpress.com.
Well, Renee, thank you so much for joining me today. And as I say, continue to, of course, keep cooking without looking. I love the title. Keep up your great work. I really appreciate what you're doing. To the audience all over the world, stay safe out there, everybody. And as I like to say, I usually say it in the outro, but I'll say it here. Thanks so much. Stay safe, everybody, and help one person today. Help a million people tomorrow. Bye, everyone.